Good evening. Welcome to Keystone Baptist Church. Thanks for coming out on this Wednesday night. So we're going to get started as we usually do with a few songs. So we're going to start with the number 480. Decided the theme, something the Lord kind of has been dealing with me in a way, is just the idea of resting in Him. Resting in who He is, and His, obviously His Word, and in His character, which we find through His Word. So just the idea of resting in Him, the Lord really brought to my mind that passage in Matthew where He says, "Come to me, you who are weary and heavy laden, and I will give you rest." And when you do go to Christ, and I hope you've had this experience, when you just go to Him, you find that that's true. There's just a rest there that cannot be passed by anything in this world. No amount of sleep, no amount of recreation, no amount of sitting by a quiet pond watching ducks, if that's your thing. None of that's going to help you. None of that's going to give you a peace like what Christ can give you. And I hope that you have that tonight. I hope that you're able to say, I can fellowship with Christ. I can fellowship with Him. And that's always a wonderful thing when you can do that. And we so often let that get away from ourselves. But at the same time, we know that it's present. Yes, sir?
480.
Yes, 480. That is correct. Number 480 in your red hymnal. Your red hymnal there in the pew. Number 480, Near to the Heart of God. So we're going to sing about that theme of rest as we talk about that. We're going to just think about that as you sing. Sing to the Lord and sing to each other as we sing. We'll sing all three verses of Near to the Heart of God, number 480. Job in that first song. Now just go over to the next page there, right there in front of you. You don't even have to turn a page. Jesus, I am resting, resting. We'll sing the first, the second, we'll sing the first three verses. We'll just stick with those first three. We'll just sing Jesus, I am resting, resting. Just continue to think about that truth. That's always kind of really encouraging when you think about ultimately when we go to heaven, that's exactly what we'll have. We'll have Christ's presence and nothing but peace and joy. What a wonderful truth. We're going to sing about this now as we can rest in that now. And that's a wonderful truth. So we're going to sing about that first three verses of Jesus, I am resting, resting. Okay. So some of you are familiar with it. If you know it, sing out. We'll just sing that third is last, simply trusting thee, Lord Jesus. Well known to you, so good job on that one. So for our last song, we'll go over just a couple pages. We'll sing number 483, Like a River Glorious. This one should be pretty well known to most of you. So sing out in this last one. For our last one, would you please stand with me? Please stand with me. Sing out as this last. You've done very well this evening. Continue to sing to God and to one another. Like a River Glorious, all three verses. Like a
right, great singing tonight. You can go ahead and be seated. And thank you again, just great singing, some good songs tonight. Now, I didn't see how many people that second song that was unfamiliar to you. All right, the pianist raised her hand. So, All right, no, it's a great song there and a good choice. I was glad that we were able to sing that tonight. A really good message to that. So if you tonight, if you have the prayer sheet that was back there, you go and pull it out. We'll look at that before we go. The week 3 focus is the military, both active and reserves, and our government officials. On the federal level, we have President Joe Biden and Vice President Kamala Harris. And then for the first time, we are able to pray for our governor, Glenn Youngkin. And so we're excited to be able to do that. His first day in office, he made some changes there that many of them we would agree with, and so we're excited about that. And then also for our senators, we have Tim Kaine and Mark Warner, and then for our area here, we have Representative Jennifer Wexton. And so we'll pray for them in just a second. And then for our missionaries tonight, 3 that we look at our missionaries and we're very careful. Pastor I looks at and prayerfully evaluates the individuals that he allows to come here and candidate. And then as a deacon and trustees board and with the pastoral staff, we again prayerfully look at to evaluate those that we want to be part of their ministry. And really, we want them to be part of our ministry. And these are 3 individuals and two organizations, and an individual that we are excited to be part of. The top 2, David Gibbs Jr. and David Gibbs III, both of them, they are related. They both run Christian law organizations. The first one there is Christian Law Association. It says Legal Assistance to Preserve Freedoms. And what they do is they go around to churches or to Christian schools or just Christian organizations as a whole and help them fight for the rights that are either guaranteed to them through the Constitution, whether federal or state, or looking at just opportunities to help them in an advisory role of are they allowed to do something or just helping with defense and some legal caution there. And so for this one here, for the first one, David Gibbs Jr. with Christian Law Association, they say that they have people in Washington State, Florida, Oregon, and North Carolina spread throughout the country right now. And so one of the main things that they've asked prayer for is that they, as they are ministering the legal advice, that they would do it well, that they would do it professionally, but also that they would stay healthy. This time of year, typically people are starting to get sick, and just with the coronavirus still hanging around, that's also a situation that is there. And then they also put a note in that with Keystone Baptist Church and the Academy, we have supported them for many years. And so we're excited about that. And then David Gibbs III, his son, grew up working for a Christian Law Association, but then went on his own and has the National Center for Life and Liberty, which again is the legal protection, and it's a little bit more broad than the CLA and just working with other Christian organizations and individuals with what they're able to help there. And then Ghassan Haddad is a individual that has started a Bible theological seminary in Amman, Jordan. And so over there in the Middle East, really excited about that. Even though Jordan is a Muslim country, they have the freedom to worship there and to have this Bible theological seminary that is there. And it's a great opportunity. They have students from several Middle Eastern countries that their countries are closed to Christianity, and so they go here for the schooling and then go out. And so he's asked for several things that are related to the virus and the COVID. He's recovering from it. He stopped having symptoms, but the doctor said that it could be a 2 to 6 months recovery process. And if you've had it, or I'm sure all of us know somebody who has had it, that it can take a while to recover there. And then also for the seminary, some of the students have tested positive. One individual lost his father, and then another pastor lost support because of how COVID has affected the economy so much. They weren't able to support him financially as easily, so we'll pray for them. And then their daughter, Madeline, is in Florida. She's a second semester student there in Florida at a university, and just that she will stay faithful to the Lord and also for her personal financial needs. And again, just thanking us for our support. And then underneath there, we have a couple of the regular prayer requests for Reba Pressgraves, Debbie Shipe, Pastor C's friend Ian for salvation, and then for Rex, Michael with the cancer treatments and the situation that he's dealing with. And then Pastor C, for the past several months, has had a problem with his shoulder, and so he had an MRI this past Tuesday and needs to get the results for that, just hopefully figure out what's going on so they can figure out a regimen of maybe whether surgery or hopefully more physical therapy to be able to figure out what they would have and need to do there. And then it's not on the list, but just keep in prayer, there's quite a few people that we know across many of our ministries that are not doing well physically, whether it's just, again, the flu or have tested positive for the coronavirus, just that we'll keep them in prayer as well. Are there any other personal requests that didn't make it on the sheet this evening before I pray? No? All right, well, let's go ahead and open up in prayer this evening. Dear Lord Father, we thank you so much for this day, and we thank you that we are able to rely on you. We thank you for your Son dying on the cross and giving us the opportunity to have a personal relationship with you so that we can bring our praises and our prayer requests to you. As I focus on our weekly individuals here, Lord, our government and military officials, we're excited to be able to, again, just bring them to prayer and to you, that even though some of these individuals, we may not agree with the policies that they make or the stance that they take, but we do know that they are in this position of authority, and this did not surprise you, that you have orchestrated this from the beginning of time, but that you would help them, whether it's President Biden or Vice President Harris. And then also we praise you that of the governor's race, that the Glenn Youngkin is in charge there, and just that the opportunities that this could have for us, that you would guide and direct him and his advisors that are around him, Lord. And then also for our state senators, Kane and Warner, that again, we may disagree with a lot of the decisions that they make, that you would bring people along beside them to give them good, godly counsel. And then also Representative Wexton, that she would also have those around her that would guide and direct her towards you. And then for the several requests mentioned from our missionaries, we're excited to be part of both CLA and the National Center for Life and Liberty, that you would just be with the CLA and as their individuals and their ministers and their lawyers are across the country, that you would keep them safe, that you would help them know how to handle each situation properly, and that your will takes place. And we know that your will take place there, but that with the individuals that are involved, that they would be open and willing to work with the situations that are arising there. And then we also pray for the several requests for Ghassan and Gada Haddad with the seminary, just with the many things, not just there, Lord, but across the world, and even our own community that have faced with COVID, and just whether restrictions or sickness or death, Lord, that you would help each one of those situations. Again, you know why, and you knew that it would happen, and just that you would help each individual to accept and to learn and grow from what whatever situation they are dealing with now. And then we also ask prayer for Pastor C, that they would be able to figure out what is going on with his shoulder, and then also for the many people that we know that are dealing with sickness or just under the weather, whatever it may be, that they would recover quickly, recover completely, Lord. As thanks in your Son's name. Amen. All right. So Pastor Wright has been going through the past year, really the full year, started last January, going through the Bible chronologically, from the beginning to end, going through there. And so when he was not feeling well, and he's one of the ones that is on the upward tick of recovering from having the coronavirus a second time there, and so he's doing well, but still asked me to preach tonight. And I was going through, I've got a list of sermon topics that I look at and I was like, at some point I'm going to write a sermon about that. And actually I have a Word document on my computer. And one of those sermon topics was just the two words, but God. And actually, for several years, I've wanted to write this sermon. This gave me the opportunity to do that. And so the word there, the first word, but, it's a three-letter word, and it's a very simple word, very easy, but it's one that has great meaning. And it can have a lot of power and a lot of effect on people there. And it can convey both hope and despair. We all can understand that we've been in situations, I had so much fun doing that, but... Or we look at the other side of things, it wasn't that exciting, but, and that word there can, again, offer so much hope or so much despair on what's happening there. And even in our modern language, we are able to basically leave that word unsaid in some conversations, and people will pick up on it. Hey, you did a great job, that was well done, I was really proud of you. But, and you look at there, and it goes through, and especially if that is an employer to an employee, or a coach to a player, or a parent to a child, or a spouse to a spouse. We look at that, we can understand that that is something we look at, and that word can cause a lot of tension or a lot of hope. And we can look at it And I wanted to write a sermon, and I wanted to go through and do an exhaustive study on, at least in the King James language, in King James English, of those two words. Every time that the words "but God" came up in the Bible, I wanted to study it. I wanted to write the sermon. So this gave me the opportunity to do that. So I literally Googled "but God." Like how many times this shows up in the Bible. And again, I just chose the King James because I know with different translations, the wording can be a little bit different. So I chose the King James to narrow it down there. And I was going through, there's quite a few times those two words show up together. And I was kind of dividing the passages up in different categories where God provided, or God protected, or God guided, or God saved, or something like that. And I was going through, and I found that a large percentage of those phrases all went back to the same story. And I was like, you know what? What I'm going to do is I'm going to preach on that story, and it's a familiar one. And so if you have your Bibles tonight, turn to Genesis chapter 45. Genesis 45. Typically, when I step in and preach and help Pastor Wright, I like to try to stay in line with where he is at and do something along the same topic, or do something that is along the same lines, or some historical backing there. But like I said, the Lord directed me to this, and I was excited to be able to do it. And tonight we're going to look at the life of Joseph. Now, for those that have grown up in church or been around the Bible for a long time, the life of Joseph is most likely not new. It is something that is familiar to you. Actually, I would probably, with pretty good confidence, I could call on 90% of the people in here, and you would be able to give us at least an outline of the life of Joseph. And so that's what I'm going to do. We're going to focus a little bit on one particular aspect of his life, one particular time period. But for those who may not know, Joseph was born, and when he was born, he was the youngest. And depending on how you look at the numbers, he was the youngest of 10 or 12 brothers. And he had some sisters in there, but he had a lot of older brothers. And in Hebrew culture, in Middle Eastern culture, even to this day, the older you were, the more important you were in the family. The oldest son was almost always the one that got the biggest inheritance. One of the ways that I heard that inheritance worked back then was that the oldest son would get half of whatever the father had. He would get half of that wealth, half of the land, half of the servants, half of the animals. Half of it would go to the first son. Then the second son, half of what was left would go to him. And then the third, half of what was left would go to him. And it just went down the line. Well, Joseph, being somewhere down near the bottom of either like the 13th or the 11th, just again, depending how you do the numbers there and how it's interpreted, he's not typically supposed to get that much. But Joseph, when he was born and he was his father Jacob's favorite son. And one of the ways that you showed your favoritism back then, and we could stop there, just talk about my favorite son and how that caused a lot of family strife. We're not going to focus on that. But the way you showed favoritism back then was by the clothing you allowed your children to wear. And so we know of Joseph in the coat of many colors. And if you grew up in church and you had those flannel boards that were up there and that would go and you put up there, and one week they would put somebody up and be like, Moses. And he would have like a brown coat on or whatever. And the next week, same guy, but this time Jesus, and he'd be carrying a staff or whatever. Well, then this week, if we were doing, it'd be Joseph, but he'd have a coat of many colors on because you could change the coat colors, kind of thing. So the flannel boards would be able to do that. So the coat of many colors, that's what Joseph is known for. Now, again, that could be something the striped or rainbow colored going through there. I've also heard it mentioned that this coat was whatever the many colors were. The reason that they could, in Jacob's mind, that he was giving Joseph this coat of many colors, because he did not expect Joseph to do a lot of physical manual labor. Because as the favorite son, he would be around the house, he would be learning those kind of things. He would not be in the fields, he would not be with the animals, he wouldn't be doing that because you wouldn't want that nice clothing messed up. Another idea that I've heard is that it was probably long-sleeved, or at least longer sleeves than the others, because again, you wouldn't be doing a lot of physical labor. Well, it was very obvious to the older brothers who were supposed to be the favorite, who were supposed to get the inheritance, that this Joseph was the one that got it. And looking at we don't have exact ages, but the oldest son was probably close to 18 years older than Joseph. He was definitely old enough to have his own life by the time Joseph came around. So he was expecting to be the favorite for a long time. Well, Joseph goes, and then again, he is known for his dreams. And those dreams and him telling his family those dreams did not help his reputation with his brothers. Two big dreams that he had that he told his brothers were that he was there and the sun and the moon and the stars all bowed down to him. And he probably, my interpretation is he was there sitting at the dinner table and he's like, I had another dream last night. And they're all like, of course you did. What was it this time? And he's like, well, it was the sun and moon and stars and they're all bowing down to me. And the oldest brother looks over and goes, what? Yeah, they're all bowing down to me. Again, we don't know how old Joseph was, but I almost picture him as a little bit younger and just excited to be able to tell what happened. Because if I think he was older, he might have been able to read the room a little bit better, kind of thing. So he's probably a little bit younger. Again, that's my interpretation. Don't take that as fact here, okay? I'm not putting that in a commentary that I'm writing. But you look at there, and he's like, yeah, the sun is, and guys, I think mom and dad were the sun and the moon, and you all were the stars. What? And so he has that. And then another one, he has a dream where they were going and they all had bundled up in the dream these stalks of grain or hay that were there. And he's like, guys, had another dream. Of course you did. Because they actually taunt him, they mock him. They say, here comes the dreamer. And so they knew, like Joseph always was telling his brothers and his parents about the dreams. And in this dream, all of the bales of hay and everything that were there, the piles of hay, he's like, guys, yeah, so we're baling hay and piling these up and we put them all together. And guess what happened to all of yours? What happened to ours, Joseph? All of yours bowed down to mine. It was crazy. What do you think it means? And then he didn't know at that point, or most likely didn't know. But again, as an older siblings here who are supposed to be the favorite, you don't like this idea of your little brother saying that everything is going to be bowing down to him, especially not when dad has shown his favoritism there. So the brothers come up with this idea that one day when Joseph comes out to inspect the fields and figure out what's going on, bring a report back to father, they're going to basically kidnap him, throw him in a pit, and leave him to die. And to make sure dad knows that he's dead, we're going to take that fancy coat of his, rip it into shreds, put some blood on it, and take it back to dad and be like, Dad, look what we found. Okay, the brothers, I mean, we could spend a whole night, actually several nights, just talking about the brothers. And I mean, just thinking about just think about this for a second. Reuben was the oldest. Just think about it for a second, Reuben. Okay, you're going to kidnap your younger brother, your father's favorite. You're going to tell him that again. You're going to tell your dad that your brother got mauled to death by a wild animal and show him his favorite coat covered in blood. What is that going to do to his mental health there, kind of thing? Like, just think about that for a second. But they didn't care. They didn't care about their father. They didn't care about their brother, about Joseph. They didn't care about any of that. They just wanted their way. So they throw him into a pit. Well, come to find out, Reuben had a little soft spot there, so he was supposed to come back later and pull Joseph out of the pit. Don't know what he was going to do with him after that, but he was supposed to pull him out of there. Well, the brothers, being a very, the word just left me, but being proactive and understanding money and wealth and things like that, they were like, wait a second, there's this caravan traveling by, and they've got some slaves on there. Instead of wasting our brother and just killing him, what if we made some money off of him? And the rest of them were like, great idea. No, it's not. It's terrible. You guys are terrible people. But they're like, let's do it. That way we don't have to worry. I mean, we'll still show dad the coat of many colors and whatnot, tell him he's dead, but we'll sell him. That way we're not wasting him. And so they do. They sell him off to Egypt. And he goes down there. So Joseph is now in a situation where he has been sold into slavery by his family. He is in a completely new culture, most likely a new language. And where he was favorite at one point, and not sure all of the blessings that would have had, but he is now a slave having to trek all the way, get several hundred miles from Israel, modern day Israel, down to Egypt, going there and get sold as a slave. I had a college professor once that gave us a list of people and a list of situations. And basically at the top it said, what would you do if? And down at the bottom it said if you had been illegally arrested illegally and then sold off and sent to a land that you didn't know, treated unfairly, and all this kind of stuff, what would you do? And there were several things like that. And a lot of us, it was a group of young men that were training for the ministry, and for several, we'd say, well, for that one, we'd run away, or for that one, we'd be really upset, or that one, we would do this kind of stuff, or we'd do this. And the next slide that the professor had, each one of those headings was a different Bible character, and then he used that to help illustrate our responses. And so Joseph, when he shows up to Egypt, again, new culture, new language, definitely new position in life that he has to deal with there. And so he gets bought by a guy named Potiphar, who is the captain of the guard of Pharaoh. And while he's working there, he does a really good job. The Lord blesses him. Joseph stayed faithful to the Lord. And going through all of that, he has a good testimony and rises through the ranks of Potiphar's house. Well, while he's there, apparently he was an attractive-looking young man. Potiphar's wife takes a fancy to him and begins to pressure him to sleep with her. And this apparently had gone on for a long time, where she would pressure him. And finally, one day, she was able to corner him in a room and said, "Lie with me." And Joseph looks at her and says, "How can I do this and sin against you and sin against God?" He's like, "I'm not going to do that. I'm not going to sin against," he also said, "I'm not going to sin against Potiphar. I'm not going to sin against your husband. I'm not going to do that." So Joseph knew that was wrong. And she grabbed a hold of him and he ran, leaving his outer cloak behind. Well, when she realized this doesn't work, she cries out, says that that Joseph had tried to force himself on her, and by proof, she showed his outer cloak there. Now, with a little sidestep here, Joseph was owned by the captain of the guard. This guy's job, most likely, he would have been in charge of executions. Pharaoh wants somebody dead. Potiphar's in charge of the soldiers. That's the guy that does it. Interestingly, again, I'm not putting this in any commentary, but interesting that the guy who is in charge of executing people, most likely in charge of executing people, decides to not execute, but instead jail the man who's just accused of raping his wife. Maybe Potiphar knew that his wife was a little bit crazy and knew Joseph didn't deserve it, but he had to do something. Again, maybe. Not putting in the commentary, just some random thoughts that I've had. So back to the story, Joseph gets thrown in jail. So we've already seen that Joseph has gone from really well living, being able to have the favorite position in his household, sold to slavery by his family, by his brothers. Well, he's worked his way up, still being a slave, but he's in charge of it. He's the head servant, head slave, but gets wrongfully charged with rape and is now in prison. Well, while he's there, he interprets, people find out that he can interpret dreams. He interprets two dreams of these two individuals that worked for Pharaoh himself. And he looked at one guy and said, "Your dream means that you are guilty, you are going to be executed. Your dream means that you are innocent, and you are going to get put back into your place of elevation working for Pharaoh." That dude is so excited. And he's like, "This is great." And when he gets let out of jail, Joseph calls through the bars. He's like, "When you get back to Pharaoh, remember me." And he's like, "Yeah, I'll do it. I'll do it." Roughly 2 years later, Pharaoh has a dream. And Pharaoh says, "We need to figure out what is going on. I don't know what's happening here." And this guy who had been in prison with Joseph was like, "Oh yeah, that guy. Whoops." He's like, "There was a guy when I was in jail that interpreted my dreams and he interpreted them correctly. He interpreted them the right way. He told me it was and what happened, and it came true." So Pharaoh's like, "Get that guy out here." Well, for sake of time, basically what happened, he was told him the dream. Joseph said, "This is what the dream is what the dream means, and what's going to happen is that we're going to have 7 years of plenty, 7 years of famine, and we need to save food up, because if we don't, this country is going to starve. We will face that famine, and it's going to be a terrible situation." And so Joseph then goes and works his way up basically to what we would consider like the prime minister of Egypt. That he is second in command of the entire kingdom of Egypt, a very powerful nation at this point. So he's there. Then, when the 7 years of famine come, and this is where we're getting to about the story now. The 7 years of famine come, and people are coming from all around to Egypt because they know there's food there. And this group of Israel, well, they're not Israelites yet, but this group show up from the land of Canaan looking for food. And Joseph instantly recognizes them as his brothers. The guys that, we don't know how long it was, but potentially 20 years before, sold him into slavery with the original intention of murdering him. And he sees them. Well, he, again, for sake of time, he lets them have their food and they go back, but he says, "Do you have any younger brothers?" "Yes, we have Benjamin." And says, "Well, bring him back the next time you come." And so that, again, for the sake of time, they bring Benjamin back, and the situation develops that eventually Joseph is able to reveal to his brothers that I am Joseph. And that's where we get this part here in Genesis chapter 45. This is where we begin to see, and we're going to look at 4 times in Genesis and 1 time in the New Testament of where the phrase "but God" comes into effect, and what that means and what is being developed there, and why it is such a powerful phrase. So right now you're in Genesis 45. Look at verse 1, please. It says, "Then Joseph could not refrain himself." This is when he is going and he's talking to these men. Again, and they don't know it's Joseph. I didn't mention that earlier for those who may not know the story. They don't know it's Joseph. Again, Joseph has been living in Egypt for probably close to 20 years at this point, and he is prime minister of Egypt. He is speaking Egyptian. He is dressed like an Egyptian. He is doing everything that a prime minister of a country would be doing. And these farmers, these herdsmen are here in front of him. And so verse 1, "Then Joseph could not refrain himself before them that stood by him, and he cried, 'Cause every man to go out.'" He said this. He said, "Cause every man to go out from me. And there stood no man with him, while Joseph made himself known unto his brethren. And he wept aloud. And the Egyptians in the house of Pharaoh heard. And Joseph said unto his brethren, I am Joseph. Doth my father yet live? And his brethren could not answer him, for they were troubled at his presence." All right. Stop there. Quick side note. I love the phrase there. It says his brothers could not answer him. Yeah, no wonder. They thought he was dead for 20 years. And then this guy starts speaking to them in perfect, again, we don't know what language, but let's say it was Hebrew, starts speaking to them in perfect Hebrew, which this guy should not have known because he's the prime minister of Egypt. And he's claiming to be our brother. And wait a second, that is Joseph. Oh no. Because this guy's in charge. This guy could do whatever he wants, and we can't do a thing about it. So it's no wonder that the brothers were speechless here. And verse 4, it says, "And Joseph said unto his brethren, Come near to me, I pray you. And they came near. And he said, I am Joseph your brother, whom ye sold into Egypt. Now therefore be not grieved, nor angry with yourselves, that ye sold me hither. For God did send me before you to preserve life. For these 2 years hath there been famine in the land, and yet there are 5 years in which there shall neither be earing or harvest," in other words, planting or harvest. "And God sent me before you to preserve you a posterity in the earth, and to save your lives by a great deliverance. So now it was not you that sent me hither, but God. And he hath made me a father to Pharaoh, and the Lord of all his house, and a ruler throughout all the land of Egypt." So there we see in the middle of verse 8, is that Joseph is looking at his brothers, and he's looking at it saying, listen, you guys, I know you're scared. I know you're doing this. And I mean, okay, granted, I know that you're scared because I said I'm your brother that you guys sold to Egypt. So obviously you're a little terrified, you're a little freaked out, but guys, listen, you didn't send me down here. God did. And he goes through, in verse 8 again, it says, "So it was not you, but God hath delivered me, made me a father to Pharaoh." In other words, a provider to Pharaoh, and the Lord of all his house, and the ruler throughout all the land of Egypt. And he's looking at it in verse 6, he says, we've had famine for 2 years, and guys, there's 5 more years coming. And if you had not sold me into slavery like God wanted you to, we would all be dead. Because you're able to come down here and get this food that the Lord told me we should be preserving. So turn forward a few chapters to Genesis 48. We're looking at the second instance here. And this one is that in this situation here, what has taken place between chapters 45 and 48 is that the brothers have repented, they've made up with Joseph and everything there, and Joseph has brought his entire family to live in Egypt, about 70 people. His father, his brothers, their wives and children are all there. And so they're living in Egypt now, and they've been living in Egypt for several years. Well, now Joseph's father, Jacob, is sick, basically almost on his deathbed, and his brothers are terrified. Because once dad is dead, Joseph's going to take his revenge on us. Once dad is out of the picture, that's the only thing that's kept him from killing us all these years. And once he's gone, we're in trouble. So here we see this is actually Jacob talking to his sons throughout this chapter. And so at this point, his name was changed to Israel, That's where we get the name the children of Israel, because that was actually his name. The Israelites are descended from him. And it's going through, and he's blessing his sons. Jacob is blessing his sons going through. And we see that in verse 21, chapter 48, verse 21, and Israel said to Joseph, behold, I die, but God shall be with you, and bring you again unto the land of your fathers. And then verse 22 talks about how he was given a portion of the land and the territory that was there. This here is a wonderful, encouraging verse, because Joseph is talking to his father again, who is on his deathbed, and Jacob knows that he's going to pass away soon. He says, I am going to die. I'm about to die, but God will be with you. And again, that's very easy to skim over, to just flip over those two words there, but God. But I'm going to put just a little pause in there. Jacob says to Joseph, behold, I am about to die, but God will be with you. And we can look at that again as a great comfort. That no matter what happens, no matter who comes into our life or who leaves our life, whatever happens there, God is a steady, solid, consistent. I love how the Bible talks about God being a mighty fortress or a strong rock. That if you look at that, the mighty fortress there, those things don't move. Even to this day, fortresses that have been around for hundreds, if not thousands of years are still there. Now, they may be deteriorated, they may collapse and things like that because it's man-made. But the fortress that God is talking about here is is an area of protection, an area of defense, an area where you can offensively go and everything, and it's possible there. But it doesn't move. Several years ago, I got the opportunity to visit one of our missionaries, the Moors in Ireland. Now, one of the cool things about America is you're driving around, except in the Midwest. It's a little bit different out there. But you drive around most other places, and every 20 miles or so, you get a Target or a Walmart. It's fantastic. Or a McDonald's. Like, where I grew up in Winchester, and I counted once, within an 8-mile radius, there were 7 McDonald's. No matter where I went, I could get McDonald's. It was fantastic. I loved it. Then I moved to Greenville, and there was like 1. I was very upset about that. But anyhow, anywhere you go. But in England and Ireland, every 20 miles, there's like a 300, 400-year-old castle that's there. And the reason you know that is because they're still there. A fortress doesn't move. You can't pick it up and move it. All right? Well, actually, they did. Yeah, shut your mouth, okay? They've done it before, but you're ruining my illustration. God doesn't move. A strong rock and a mighty fortress. If we find ourselves away from God, it's not because God slipped out in the night. It's because we're the ones that have drifted away from him. And so here, Jacob is looking at Joseph and saying, I'm going to die. I'm not going to be here anymore with you. I almost see like fatherly comfort looking. It's like, I've had a great last couple of years. I've loved that I've been able to spend these few years with you and that you're here with me at the end. But Joseph, I'm going away. But God's going to still be here with you. And again, an amazing comfort that we take from that. So Jacob does pass away. He dies, and the brothers are, again, very, very nervous. Because Joseph, both humanly speaking and his position in the government, was well within his rights to execute every single one of his brothers for what they did to him. Again, from our human perspective, take God out of the equation for a second, that is definitely something that he could have done. And honestly, they were expecting it because they probably would have done it if the roles were reversed. And his position as prime minister of Egypt, nobody would have said anything because he's in charge. So turn forward 2 chapters to Genesis chapter 50. Jacob dies in verse 33, and the first part of chapter 50 is basically the funeral. Pharaoh gives Joseph the opportunity to leave and to bury his father, and he goes and he does that. And then verse 14 comes at chapter 50, says that they return to Egypt, the brethren, from burying his father. And then we'll start in verse 15. It says, and when Joseph's brethren saw their father was dead, they said, Joseph will pre-adventure, or will most definitely hate us, and will certainly requite us or pay us back for all the evil which we did unto him. And they sent a messenger. They didn't even want to go see him personally. They sent a messenger. Honestly, I don't blame them. And they sent a messenger unto Joseph, saying, Thy father did command before he died, saying, in other words, hey, listen, Joseph, this is what Dad said before he died, just in case you forgot. Verse 17, So shall ye say unto Joseph, Forgive, I pray thee, the trespass of thy brethren, and their sin, for they did unto thee evil. And now we pray thee, forgive the trespass of the servants of the God of thy father. And Joseph wept when they spake unto him. And so here we see that they sent the messenger, and it seems like some time might have transpired during this, but Joseph is now in front of his brothers, and it says that Joseph wept. It was almost like the idea of Joseph looking and saying, guys, after all I've done for you, how can you still think that way about me? How can you still look at me and say that I'm going to try to murder you now that Dad's gone? For the record, I could have done it while he was here because I'm in charge. But I didn't want to do it then, and I don't want to do it now. And so verse 18, it says, And his brothers also wept and fell down before his face. And they said, Behold, we be thy servants. And Joseph said unto them, Fear not, for am I in the place of God? But as for you, ye thought evil against me, but God meant it unto good, to bring to pass, as it is this day, to save much people alive. Now therefore fear ye not, I will nourish you and your little ones. And he comforted them and spake kindly unto them. Here we see one of the greatest instances of forgiveness by a person, by a man, not including God, in the Bible, where Joseph is looking at it and saying, listen, you guys meant this for evil. I understand that. Like, you guys really hated me, and you really wanted me dead, and you sold me into slavery, and you thought you were done with me. You meant this evil unto me, but God meant this unto good. Now, I want to pause just for a second. And I don't want you to, if I was dealing with my students or whatever, I would tell them, because sometimes kids don't fully understand the rhetorical question. So I'm going to say it rhetorically here. Don't raise your hand, because I don't want you to tell me, all right? Again, sometimes I'll say a question and be like, you'll understand why I say this, but sometimes I'll say a question, a kid will raise his hand and be like, no. So how many of you, again, don't raise your hand. How many of you in your life would look and say, you know for a fact somebody did something to you with the intention, let's use the word here that they use in the Bible, with the intention of evil? Yeah, don't raise your hand. But you know for a fact that's what they purposely did it to hurt you. Whether financially, physically, mentally, socially, whatever it was their purpose to mess you up one way or the other. Then think for a moment that you're put in a position of extreme authority and power, and that person is standing before you, completely at your mercy. Would you be able to say to that person, yes, again, don't raise your hand, I know that you meant that evil unto me, but God did some really amazing things in my life because of what you did, and a lot of good came out of that. Again, one of the biggest instances of human forgiveness that we see in the Bible. And hopefully in situations like this, we are doing that, where we're able to see that. We're able to see God's hand working through even the evil, again, using the word here, the evil actions of people that they've done to us in our past, things that they've done to us. And maybe you're looking at it here, you're like, Pastor Rogers, I definitely thought of somebody who did something to me, but I can't really think of what God used that in my life. Well, take not right now. Keep listening to what I'm saying about. After this, take a minute and think about it. Like, evaluate and review what has taken place in your life since that situation happened, and how has God used that in your life? And we have that there. Now, there was a situation for me, and this is not a story that I've told many people, but this is being live streamed and recorded, so a lot of people can find out about it. My senior year of high school, I was fired from my job as a sales clerk and a floor employee at Target. And the reason I was fired is because at the time what we had there was the gift registries, and you could get a coupon for a free $10 gift card. Well, the way the coupon worked, no matter how many times you scanned it, it kept spitting out gift cards. And the guy that was working over at guest service, he was like, hey, check this out, Stuart. However many times it'll keep making. I'm like, no, it won't. He's like, yeah, we'll log in, check it. And so I logged in, and it did. It made a new gift card, and It didn't print out, but it gave us a $10 gift card. He took $5 and I took $5 and we went on our way. No big deal. Didn't think anything about it. About 2 weeks later, I get called back to the security office, and rightfully so, I get fired for stealing the $5 gift card because it's my login information was used to put that in. And that just, as a senior in high school, and that just devastated me that I had just gotten fired. Like, that was a huge, huge thing that blew to me. And it wasn't until about 10 years later that I began evaluating that situation and thinking about it from a perspective on the outside, a third-person view, if you will, and seeing how did God use that in my life. Now, this wasn't an instance where somebody had done something evil to me. I think the guy at the guest service probably knew better. That's why he didn't want his number logged in. He wanted my number logged in. And so maybe I can count that as him doing evil unto me, but it was still my dumb mistake. I should have thought a little bit more about it. But looking back at it, while I was working at Target, I really enjoyed that job and I was really good at it. And they paid really well. For a senior in high school. I was 17 years old at the time, paid really well for the amount of that I was getting there. And I was beginning to do some research they offered scholarships to pay for people who were going into business with a guarantee. Well, it wasn't a scholarship, it was a grant where they guarantee that you would work and start moving up the corporate ladder at Target. But at this point, I had already given my life over to the Lord to preach and to be in the ministry, and I had already signed up to go to Bob Jones University for Bible and all this kind of stuff. I was ready to go, but I was seriously contemplating looking at this business route. And it would have made perfect sense because I would have been, most of my college would have been paid for. I would have had a guaranteed job coming out of college. I was good at the job, and I liked the job. A lot of people look at it and be like, I hated working retail and I'll never do it again. I really enjoyed it, actually. I know people, like, that's crazy to say in most circles, especially retail circles, but I really enjoyed that job. And I was good at it, I was paid well for it. But looking back, I can see how the Lord orchestrated me doing that dumb mistake to guide me in the direction He wanted me to go. Now, with this, I've got two more verses that I want to point out. And so we've seen so far that God directed, God protected, and God was able to, in chapter 45, that Joseph is looking at it and saying, no, God brought me here. And then in chapter 48, Jacob is saying, God is going to be with you. In this verse, Joseph is saying, yes, I know you meant it for evil, but God had other plans for it. And the next verse is actually verse 24 in chapter 50 as well. Let's start at verse 22, please. It says, and Joseph dwelt in Egypt, he and his father's house, and Joseph lived 110 years. And Joseph saw Ephraim's children of the third generation. The children also of Machir and the son of Manasseh were brought up upon Joseph's knees. And Joseph said unto his brethren, I die, and God will surely visit you, and bring you out of this land unto the land which he sware to Jacob, to Isaac, to Abraham, to Jacob, and to Isaac. And Joseph took an oath of the children of Israel, saying, God will surely visit you, and he shall carry up my bones from hence. Here, it says, that's going through, verse 24, it says, I die, and in this translation, actually, in the King James, it says, and God will surely visit you. Another way there, they could have done that, but God will visit you. Now, again, this is the same promise that Jacob had made Joseph, that he had said, Joseph, I'm dying, and I'm gone, but God's going to be here. Here, Joseph is saying to his brothers, I'm going to die, but God will take you out of this land. This isn't where you're supposed to be forever. You are going to be delivered from this land there. And then if you'll turn forward to Acts chapter 7. In the New Testament, Acts chapter 7, please. One of the difficulties with modern technology is that most of you guys have your phones on where your Bibles are. Well, I need to invent a phone app that when somebody's looking up a new passage, I hear the pages turning. Because that's the way preachers know when everybody's found the page, is when the pages stop turning. But there's not many pages turning anymore. Thanks, technology. Anyway, so there we go. That'll work. Yeah, so just raise your hand. Don't raise your hand. So Acts chapter 7, verse 9. It says, and the patriarchs, this is talking about Joseph and dealing with the patriarchs, moved with envy, sold Joseph into Egypt, but God was with him. Now, I want us to look real quick at something about this story that we've looked at here, from Genesis chapter 45 all the way to Genesis 50. Look at the timing of these passages and when this would have taken place in the timeline of Joseph's life. And so this time, you can raise your hand and just call out, but when would this have happened in Joseph's life? Like these stories as a whole. Okay, first when he was 17, definitely. So when he was a young man, he would go through there that he was sent away. That's when he was sold into Egypt. But then when we move forward, so he's sold into Egypt, going through there and all those difficult times that he had, the verses that we look at here, Genesis 45, chapter 45, Genesis chapter 48, and then both passages of chapter 50, who is Joseph at this point? What's happening in his life? It's at the end of his life. Yes! It's at the end of his life. His life's almost over. So Joseph is seeing all these times and instances where he's looking back, and we don't see this phrase very often in his early life. Now, I'm sure Joseph, again, he had a heart that was right with God, and he followed God, and God blessed him for that. But it wasn't until he was older and able to look back on his life that he said, yes, you meant this for evil, but God meant it for good. Where you knew what you were doing. What you were doing was a terrible, wicked thing, but I've been able to save millions of people because of this, of the result here. Now, I'm sure as Joseph was going through, he was looking at this, as he's going through these really hard times in his life, he was human. He had to be curious, maybe even question. I don't know if he ever doubted, but I wouldn't be surprised if he did. Now, from a commentary, I took part of this little part here that I'm about to read. It says, if Joseph never went to Egypt, he would have never been sold to Potiphar. If Joseph was never sold to Potiphar, Potiphar's wife would never have falsely accused him of rape. If Potiphar's wife never falsely accused Joseph of rape, then Joseph would never have been put in prison. If Joseph had never been put in prison, he would never have met the baker and the butler of Pharaoh. If Joseph never met the baker and butler of Pharaoh, he would never have interpreted their dreams. If they hadn't interpreted the dreams, he wouldn't have interpreted Pharaoh's dream. If he had not interpreted Pharaoh's dream, he would not have become the prime minister. If he had not become the prime minister, he would not have been able to wisely prepare for the terrible famine. If he had not prepared for the famine, then his family in Canaan would have died. If his family in Canaan would have died, the Messiah could not have come from that family. If the Messiah did not come from the family, then Jesus never came. If Jesus never came, then we are all dead in our sins and without hope in this world. So all of this here that we look at, God orchestrated this. And so sometimes in our lives, there are terrible, horrible things that happen. As I mentioned, I had you think about a little bit ago, has anybody ever done anything with the intention of evil on you? And if they had, would you be able to look at them and honestly say, you meant it for evil, but God meant it for good? Would you be able to forgive them of that way that Joseph did his brothers? Not only that, but sometimes when we're in the midst of something that is hard, of something that is difficult. I've had several really difficult things, and for time I don't have opportunity to go into it. But one of the things that has helped me the most when I'm going through a hard time is that I look at it and I say, I don't know exactly why God is doing this to me, but I do know that I'll be able to help somebody else who goes through this. I've had opportunities, whether working at Christian camps or here at the school, to go through and counsel quite a few teenagers. And the more you counsel, the more you work with people, the more you get to understand who they are and everything there. But at the same time, there are some of those individuals that I cannot fully understand what they have gone through. And again, there's some hard things that kids have gone through, that you have gone through. And you may come to me and talk to me about it, and I can sympathize. Like I can feel the loss, and I can feel the hardship. But I can't say that I know what you're feeling. I know what you're going through. I can't say that. And I'm very careful not to say that to students when I don't know. Because they understand. They can look at it. I can look and say, I know what you're going through. No, you don't, Pastor Rogers. And I've had a kid say that to me before. And I've been very careful not to say that since. But some of you have gone through some hard things. And if you get the opportunity to counsel or to work with somebody, you can look at them and say, hey, I know exactly what you are going through. And so for me, one of the things that that again helps encourages me is that I may not know why God is doing this to me right now, but I do know that on the other side of it, I'm going to be able to help somebody. I'm going to be able to influence them. I'm going to be able to look at them and fill in that void of loss, of encouragement, of help that I may not have had when I went through it. Or I might be able to give the example that I did have when somebody else was going through it. And so Joseph here goes through, and the two phrases, the two words that we looked at was "but God." And what also goes with this is Romans chapter 8, verse 28. You don't need to turn there. The verse says, "And we know that all things work together for good to those who love God, to those who are called according to his purpose." And for us tonight, if you're a Christian here, if you're one of those that is called to love God, then one of those ones that looked at here, that all things work together for those who love God, those who are called according to his purpose, then you have the opportunity to have the same comfort that Joseph received when Jacob passed away. Joseph, I'm leaving, but God is still here. We also have the same opportunity to forgive, just like Joseph did to his brothers. I know you meant that for evil, but God meant it for good. And we also know that God is able to provide for us and to guide us and direct us in the path that he wants us to, just like he did Joseph's family after he died. Guys, I'm going to die, but God's not going to leave you in Egypt. He's going to take you out. He's going to show you the promised land. And so each one of us have the same opportunity to rely on God in each one of those type of situations. And whatever situation we're going through, again, Joseph had a lot of hard times, a lot of things that were not fair, a lot of things that we look at and say he did not deserve that. But God meant it for good. And we're going to go through a lot of hard times. We're going to go through stuff that we, from a human perspective, do not deserve. But God means it for good. God knows what he's doing. God's guiding, God's directing, and God is protecting. And we're able to use those situations to point the glory back to him, to show others how he had helped us. And it gives us the opportunity to be a testimony and example to others as well. Let's pray. Dear Heavenly Father, we thank you so much for the promises that are in your word and the stories that are here that we know are true, that the word is truth. I ask that you would help us to remember these three things here, that we can come to you for comfort, that you looked at it just as Joseph was losing Jacob, that you were with Joseph, you are with us today. That Joseph was able to forgive because he knew ultimately you had a plan for what was happening in his life. And then that Joseph was able to comfort his family, that you knew or guiding and directing and orchestrating everything from the very beginning. And that we were able to rely on that and have that same faith that they did, that you will lead us to where you want us to go. I ask that you would be with us tonight. Help us as we go home this evening and then go to our places of work or school tomorrow and Friday, that we would keep these things in the forefronts of our hearts and our mind, Lord. I ask this, that you would be with us again. In your Son's name, amen. Thank you. You are dismissed.